I didn't expect my past to be waiting for me on the sidewalk, leaning against a car like it owned the street. When I quit my old job 10 months ago, I told myself I'd never see my ex-boss again. No more late-night emails written in all caps. No more quick chats that felt like cross-examinations. No more walking into the office with a knot in my stomach. I thought that chapter ended the day I handed in my badge and walked out of that glass building with my box of stuff and my pride in tatters. Then this morning I turned the corner toward my new office and saw him. Richard. He was propped against the hood of a black BMW, right by the entrance like he'd reserved the spot with his ego. Dark coat, perfect hair, sunglasses he didn't need at 7:30 in the morning, and next to him, arms folded, was Lydia. She used to be my peer. Now she was his manager, the one who slid into my chair after they pushed me out of it. They were both smiling before they even saw me, the kind of smile you rehearse in a mirror when you're planning to hurt someone and make it look like an accident. For a second I honestly thought I was hallucinating. I actually looked over my shoulder as if there might be another entrance, another guy named Evan they could be waiting for. But there was just me, my cheap coffee in a paper cup, my thrift store jacket, and the chipped concrete steps up to the modest 2-story building where I work now, the same building where I finally started breathing again. I remember thinking, "You've got to be kidding me." I slowed down automatically. Old habits. With Richard, you always approached cautiously, like a dog that only pretends it doesn't bite. My chest did that old familiar squeeze, heart jumping ahead of my steps, palms going damp around the coffee cup lid. I hadn't felt that way in almost a year. That was the deal I made with myself when I left, a smaller paycheck for a quieter heartbeat. My therapist called it choosing a sustainable life. My mother called it starting over. Richard called it throwing away potential the last time we spoke. I called it survival. Back then, he didn't believe I'd actually walk out. He thought I was bluffing. Most days, I wasn't sure I wasn't. But I did. I walked. I took a job at a small logistics firm across town, traded the glass tower, and catered lunches for a building that smells like old printer toner and burnt coffee. My title isn't impressive anymore. The salary definitely isn't. But nobody screams at me in conference rooms. Nobody calls me at 11:47 p.m. to ask why a slide in a deck has the wrong shade of blue. I wake up, I make coffee in my tiny kitchen, I ride the bus, I sit at a desk where nobody monitors how often I blink. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. Or it was, until I saw Richard's shoes on my sidewalk. I thought about turning around, just pivoting, walking right past the building like I'd forgotten something at home, texting my boss that the bus broke down. It was a stupid idea, but it flashed through my mind anyway, fast and bright. Then Richard straightened up and turned his head, and it was too late. He'd seen me. "Ev!" he called out, like we were old buddies meeting for brunch. He pushed off the hood of the BMW with a soft tap of his palms. Lydia followed his movement with a small, amused smile, eyes already scanning me up and down. There's this thing that happens when someone once had power over you. Even when they don't anymore, your body remembers. My stride got smaller, shoulders a little tighter, like I was walking into a performance review I hadn't prepared for. I forced myself to keep my pace steady, one foot in front of the other. Same rhythm as every other morning. The coffee helped, something to hold on to. I stopped a few steps from them, leaving enough distance so I didn't have to tilt my head up. "You're blocking the door," I said. My voice sounded flatter than I felt. That was good. Flat was better than shaking. Richard took off his sunglasses slowly, like we were on some kind of stage. His eyes did the same scan Lydia's had just done. Coat, shoes, backpack, building behind me. I could practically hear the silent calculation. "So," he said, dragging the word out as if he were tasting it, "this is where you landed." Lydia's smile sharpened. "Cozy," she added. Her voice hadn't changed. Still that soft, polished tone that made everything sound like a compliment, even when it wasn't. "Morning to you, too," I replied. Richard chuckled. It was the same low laugh he used when someone said something in a meeting he thought was naive. "Relax, Evan. We're just catching up." He said my full name the way he always did in the office. Never Ev there. Evan sounds more formal, easier to scold. I glanced at the glass door behind them. Through it I could see the lobby, the pot plant that never seems to die, the empty reception desk. Our receptionist doesn't start until 8. No one inside yet. No witnesses. Just us and the early street noise. "You could have sent an email," I said. "Or not." Lydia unfolded her arms and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her nails were still that same neutral color she wore when we worked together, the shade she called executive beige. "Email's so impersonal," she said. "We were in the neighborhood." "Sure. Our building is 15 miles from theirs. There is nothing in this neighborhood that would bring them here by accident." "I didn't say that. I just looked at Richard." "Why are you here?" He tilted his head, pretending to consider the question. He always used to do that before he said something cruel, like he was giving himself time to choose the exact knife. "Oh, we were just talking about you yesterday," he said finally. "Figured we'd see how you're doing." His gaze flicked to the faded sign next to the door that said, "Merit Logistics, Suite 201. Must be quite a change." There it was. The first little twist. "Change is kind of the point," I said. "You know that?" Lydia laughed softly, like I'd said something witty. "Of course," she said. "We saw your LinkedIn update, remember? Choosing balance over burnout. Very inspirational." I had forgotten I'd written that. It sounded more confident typed out at 2 in the morning than it did now, standing in front of them with my backpack strap cutting into my shoulder. "You stalking my LinkedIn now?" I asked. Richard shrugged. "We keep tabs on talent," he said. "Old habit." Talent. Funny word coming from the man who'd sat across from me in a glass room and told me I was no longer a fit for the direction of the company. That was the sanitized phrase he used while HR stared at the table and slid me the packet with the severance details. He was watching my face now, looking for a flinch. Old game. I made myself remember my kitchen this morning. The quiet. The way the sun hit the cheap countertop. The normalcy. I held on to that instead of the memory of his office. "You drove all the way across town at 7:30 in the morning to critique my career choices?" I asked. "That's dedicated." Lydia shifted her weight, heels scraping softly against the pavement. For a second, something like impatience flickered over her face, then smoothed out. "It's not just that," she said quickly. "We thought maybe you'd appreciate a familiar face." I let that sit in the air for a moment. A car passed on the street behind me, bass thudding through the closed windows. Somewhere down the block, a delivery truck's gate slammed. "Last time I saw your faces," I said slowly, "security walked me out while you pretended to be on a call." Richard's jaw moved just a fraction. He didn't like that detail being said out loud. Back then, he'd insisted it was standard protocol. As if the protocol made it less humiliating, he leaned in just enough to invade my space without technically touching me. I could smell his cologne. Same brand. "You were emotional," he said. "We were giving you some space." It took me a second to realize he was rewriting the story in front of me, out loud like he always did. Like if he said it enough times, it would become the official version. I smiled. It felt wrong on my face, but I held it there. "If I remember right, I was quiet," I said. "You were the one talking. A lot." Lydia's eyes flicked between us. She looked slightly less amused now, like she wanted him to get to whatever they came here for. Richard's own smile never faltered. "Look, Evan," he said, switching to that calm managerial tone that sounds reasonable until you realize he's just pulled the ground out from under you. "We're not here to argue about history. Water under the bridge." I watched his mouth as he said it. He always did that. Reduced months of stress, sleepless nights, and panic attacks to a metaphor about a river. "Then what are you here for?" I repeated. For a heartbeat, he didn't answer. He just studied me, like he was taking inventory. It felt like he was checking to see how much of the old Evan was still standing in front of him, the one who showed up early, stayed late, swallowed his pride, and believed every promise about just push through this quarter. Behind him, the glass doors to my building stayed closed. My keycard was in my pocket, useless until they moved. I was literally standing between my old life and my new one, and somehow he'd taken the middle. I shifted my coffee to my left hand and adjusted the strap of my backpack with my right, more to give my fingers something to do than anything else. Because I'm going to be late for work, I added, and my boss actually cares if I show up on time. Lydia's smile twisted. Does he? She asked. From what we've heard, this place is pretty forgiving. Not a lot of pressure. The way she said forgiving made it sound like lazy. I felt my teeth press together. From what you've heard, I repeated. You've been talking to someone here? Richard ignored the question. Classic. Relax, he said again, like that word had ever helped anybody. We're just having a conversation, right, Lydia? She nodded automatically, but her gaze flicked to the side, toward the small parking lot where my coworkers' cars would start rolling in any minute. There was a tiny crease between her eyebrows. She didn't want to be seen standing here either. That was new. Richard never cared who watched. He took a step closer. I didn't move back. The pavement felt steady under my shoes. You look different, he said finally. Quieter. I sleep now, I said. Helps. That made Lydia look directly at me. Just for a second. There was something like guilt there, fast and quickly buried. Richard chuckled again, but it sounded thinner. You always were dramatic, he said. It was just work, Evan. People push. That's how you grow. My heart rate kicked up. The old me would have argued with that, tried to explain what those last months had done to me. The panic attacks in the bathroom stall, the way my hands shook when my phone buzzed after dark, the way my doctor used phrases like chronic stress response, while writing a prescription I never filled because I didn't want to start needing pills, just to sit at a desk. The new me didn't. The new me just watched him and waited. If that's how you define growth, I said, I'm good staying this height. For reasons I couldn't fully understand yet, that line seemed to bother him more than anything else I'd said. His jaw tightened. Lydia's lips pressed together. For the first time since I turned that corner, I realized something important. They weren't as relaxed as they looked. Under the smirks and the rehearsed lines, something was off. A tension around the eyes, a little too much stiffness in the shoulders. Like actors in a play who've forgotten half their lines and are bluffing their way through the scene. I didn't know it yet, but whatever they were about to say next wasn't just about checking how I was doing. Richard inhaled like he was about to deliver some polished corporate speech, but the words that came out landed differently. You know, he said, it's interesting you mentioned growth, because some of us have actually been growing, expanding, taking on bigger responsibilities. Lydia shot him a warning look, small but sharp. His eyes flicked toward her, then back to me. Whatever he was working up to, she clearly didn't want him blurting it out this early. I crossed my arms, coffee forgotten. Congrats, I said. You didn't come here to brag about a promotion. He smirked. You sure? I didn't answer. That was all the invitation he needed. You walked out, Richard continued, because you thought you deserved something better, something calmer, something personal, I guess. Whatever story you've been telling yourself. He gestured vaguely toward my building. But tell me honestly, how long can you stay in a place like this? So far, I said. Longer than I survived with you. His smirk wavered, just enough for me to catch it. Lydia stepped in, voice low and sweet, like she was wiping fingerprints off a mirror. What Richard means is, we're surprised you stayed invisible this long. We thought you'd resurface. You're talented, Evan, obviously. She said it like a compliment, but her eyes said something else. You should have crawled back by now. Invisible, I repeated. That's how you framed it? Well, she said lightly, you did kind of fall off the radar. Off your radar, I corrected. Not mine. Richard let out a small laugh, but it didn't sound as relaxed as he wanted it to. You had a future with us, Evan. A real one. You know that. And you threw it all away. There it was. Irritation starting to bleed through the slick professionalism. He wasn't just here for a power trip. He was annoyed. At me. For not failing loudly enough for him to feel justified. Thrown away? I asked. You fired me. No, Richard said too quickly. We restructured. You couldn't keep up with the pace, and we offloaded me, I finished. We can use real words. It's early, but I'm awake. Richard's jaw clenched once, tightly. Lydia spoke again, but there was no sweetness left. You should know we've heard things about your performance here. I raised an eyebrow. Really? From who? She hesitated. It was half a second, barely a pause. But I saw it. A crack. Richard jumped in. Small industries talk. You'd be surprised how much information floats around. Try me, I said. They didn't answer. Because they didn't have a source. They were bluffing, and badly. For two people who used to control every word spoken in a 10-meter radius, this was sloppy. Let me guess, I said. You tried calling someone here? Fishing. Silence. Maybe you thought they'd tell you I'm struggling. Another pause. Or that I hate it. Or that I'm begging for something better. Lydia swallowed. Richard's eyes narrowed just slightly, the way they used to right before he snapped at someone in a meeting. You always were defensive, he said, and you always projected, I shot back. For a moment, none of us spoke. A car turned into the lot behind me. I recognized the dent in the left bumper, my co-worker Matt's Hyundai. He slowed when he saw the three of us, eyes lingering on Richard's suit, Lydia's heels, and my tightened posture. I gave him a small nod. I'm fine. Keep going. He did. The moment Matt looked away, Richard suddenly stepped closer, lowering his voice. Tell me something, Evan. Do you actually think this, he swept a hand toward my building again, is going to fulfill you? I don't need it to fulfill me, I said. I just need it not to destroy me. For the first time, Lydia winced. Richard opened his mouth again, but I cut him off. Why are you here? I asked. And this time, skip the inspirational metaphors. He hesitated just a flicker, but enough. He wasn't confident. He wasn't in control. He wasn't even prepared. That realization hit me quietly, like cold water down the back of my neck. They weren't standing here because they wanted to gloat. They were standing here because they needed something. A week ago, that thought would have unsettled me. But right now, with the early sunlight catching the edge of Richard's jaw and Lydia's posture finally cracking, something else clicked inside me. Something stable. Something steady. You know, I said, I actually expected you to forget about me. Move on. I was one out of 100 people you overworked into the ground. Nothing special. Richard's nostrils flared. You weren't nothing. Oh, so now I mattered, I said. Which is it? He looked past me toward the road like the words were suddenly too heavy. Lydia shifted awkwardly, the first sign that her confidence wasn't real. It was borrowed, and Richard wasn't handing her enough to keep holding it. You seem tense, I said softly. Richard straightened. We're not tense. Really? I asked. Because I am. And usually when I'm tense, it's because someone's lying to me. That landed harder than I expected. Lydia's lips parted, a tiny inhale cutting the air. Richard blinked twice, quickly. I didn't know what their secret was, but I knew they were terrified. I'd see it. Lydia stepped forward. This isn't how we wanted this to go, she said. Then how did you want it to go? I asked. She took a breath, steadier this time. We thought you'd be more open. To what? Richard finally snapped. To coming back. There it was. And it hit the air between us like metal dropping onto concrete. I didn't say anything. For several long seconds, I just stood there. Coffee cooling in my hand, wind moving the edge of my jacket, the lobby of my new life waiting behind the glass door. Richard misread my silence as weakness. He always did. We thought you'd be grateful, he said. We're offering you stability, a second chance. Most people don't get that. A small laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Stability? I said. From you? Richard's eyes hardened. Lydia tried again, stepping closer. Evan, things are different now. We're a mess? I asked quietly. She stopped breathing. Richard looked like someone had slapped him. That was the moment I knew I was right. And worse, they knew I was right. I could feel the shift in the air, the way the power dynamic flipped without anyone moving an inch. Richard's shoulders rolled back, defensive. Lydia's foot tapped once, involuntarily. Their smiles disappeared entirely. They hadn't come here to mock me. They came here because something was on fire. And they were hoping I hadn't noticed the smoke. I did. Tell me, I said softly. How bad is it? Richard's throat worked. Lydia looked away, but neither of them answered, which meant the truth was worse than anything they could say out loud. And the day wasn't even close to over. Richard didn't answer me right away. His mouth tensed like he was trying to pick the least humiliating way to start a sentence. Lydia shifted her weight again, her heels scraping the pavement in a nervous, uneven arc. She wasn't performing anymore. She wasn't even pretending. For a long moment, the three of us just stood there, silence stretching thin like a wire. Cars passed behind me, tires whispering against asphalt. A bus hissed to a stop at the corner. Somewhere a crow cawed, obnoxiously loud. But here, between us, the air felt pinned. What did you hear? Richard finally asked, voice lower than before. Enough, I said. Not everything. Just enough to know something's wrong. His jaw twitched. Who told you? No one, I said. You showed me. That got him. People like Richard don't realize how much their face betrays them when they're losing the advantage. He blinked. Slow and irritated, Lydia folded her arms across her chest, not to posture, but to hold herself together. Okay, she said quietly. Maybe things are complicated. Complicated, I repeated. That's what you call it? Richard straightened his shoulders. We're expanding, he said, which creates pressure. Temporary chaos. You're lying, I said, not raising my voice. Start with something simpler. His nostrils flared, but he didn't deny it. Fine, I said. Let's make this quicker. What did you lose? A client, a partner, funding, staff? Lydia's eyes flickered at the last word. Staff, I said. Right. Who left? She cleared her throat. Nobody left. Then who quit? I said, because they sure didn't stay. This time Richard's poker face completely cracked. His eyebrows drew together, and his lips pressed into a thin line. Lydia didn't even try to fake it. Her gaze dropped to the concrete. Don't, Richard murmured to her. Let me talk. But she didn't look up. That alone was an answer. I took a step closer, not threatening, not aggressive, just enough that they had to look at me, not the ground. Tell me how many? Richard hesitated. Lydia beat him to it. 7, she whispered. The number hit harder than I expected. 7 people leaving a single team in a few months? That wasn't turnover. That was collapse. That was rot finally showing on the outside. Richard glared at her. We don't need to disclose numbers. It's not a state secret anymore, she snapped, surprising both of us. He already knows something. Stop pretending. She sounded tired. Very tired. Not the polished, perfect Lydia I remembered. This version of her looked like she was running on fumes and stubbornness. 7, I repeated quietly. And let me guess. They left because the pace was too much. Richard bristled. If people can't handle the environment. It's toxic, I said. It's not a mystery. He stepped forward. We built something high-performing. People crumble because they're weak. Or, I said, because you break them. A muscle jumped in his cheek. You think you're better? He asked. You think leaving makes you some kind of hero? You walked out the moment things got challenging. I almost laughed. No. I walked out the moment I realized you'd rather grind people into dust than lead them. Lydia exhaled, slow and shaky. Richard turned to her sharply. You agree with him now. I didn't say that, she said. But I'm not going to pretend things are fine. He looked genuinely stunned, like he didn't know this woman who had agreed to take my job. the woman who had once defended every one of his decisions like they were gospel. "How long?" I asked her. She looked up at me. Her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were hollow. "Since December," she said. "That's when the first resignation hit. And then it didn't stop." "Why?" I asked. She hesitated. Richard jumped in before she could answer. "They were weak hires," he said. "Inadequate. We trusted HR too much. We'll fix it." "You can't fix it," I said. "Because the problem isn't HR, it's you." His face darkened. "Watch yourself." "I am," I said. "I've been watching this pattern for years. First you push someone until they break. Then you blame them for snapping. Then you find the next one, and the next, and the next." Lydia closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, she spoke softer. "It's worse now," she said. "Worse than when you were there." I believed her. She glanced around the lot as if checking who could hear her. "We lost a major account," she continued. 4 analysts quit in 6 weeks. 1 walked out at lunch and never came back. Another sent a 2-sentence email at 2 a.m. and vanished. "So that's what this is," I said. "Not nostalgia, not petty gloating. You're desperate." Richard's mouth tightened. "We're giving you an opportunity." "No," I said. "You're trying to drag me back into a burning building and hoping I won't notice the flames." Lydia's voice cracked. "We need someone who knows the structure, the systems. Someone who can stabilize things. Someone who can—" She trailed off. Her expression softened into something almost apologetic. "Someone who can survive him." The words hit Richard like a slap. "That's enough," he said sharply. "No," she said. "It's not." She turned to me fully. "You were the only one who ever pushed back without completely falling apart. Everyone else either broke or quit. You didn't. You left, but you didn't break." "Not in front of you," I said. "There's a difference." She swallowed hard. Richard recovered quickly, smoothing his jacket like he could iron out the truth. "We're prepared to offer you a higher salary, senior role, full autonomy in your segment. You'll report only to me." "Sounds like a nightmare," I said. Lydia stepped closer, dropping her voice. "Please think about it. We're drowning." Richard shot her a murderous look. I looked at both of them, my former tormentor and the woman who had helped him push me out the door. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing but clarity. A clean, steady line of thought. "You know," I said quietly, "I used to replay our conversations in my head, trying to figure out what I could have said or done to be treated better. I thought if I fixed myself, you'd treat me like a human." Richard scoffed. "Self-pity? Really?" "No," I said. "Reality." He rolled his eyes and stepped back. "We're wasting time. Evan, I need your answer. Now." I studied him for a long moment. His tight stance, his shallow breathing, the faint tremor at the corner of his jaw. He wasn't in control. He was afraid. "Here's my answer," I said softly. And the moment the words left my mouth, the entire balance between us shifted forever. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. Not dramatically, just long enough for Richard to realize he no longer controlled the pace of this conversation. He hated that. His foot shifted, his jaw tightened, and the tendons in his neck stood out like wire. "My answer," I said finally, "is no." Richard blinked once, slowly, like he couldn't fully process the word. "No?" he repeated. "No," I said again. "Not now. Not later. Not ever." Lydia drew in a breath, quiet and shaky, like she'd held on to a fragile hope this entire time and watched it crack in her hands. Richard, on the other hand, looked like someone had thrown cold water into his face. "You don't even understand what you're walking away from," he snapped. "I understand exactly," I said, "more than you ever did." "You're being emotional," he said. "No," I answered calmly. "You are." He tried to laugh, but it came out thin and clipped. "We're offering you stability, a higher salary, seniority. You would be miserable," I said. "Let's not pretend otherwise." Lydia stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Evan, are you sure? You could help fix things. We could support you this time. You never supported me, I said. You tolerated me until it was convenient not to. Richard scoffed. You're being dramatic again. I looked at him with a steadiness I didn't know I had until that exact moment. A steadiness that felt earned. Here's something you never understood, I said. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because I stopped letting you convince me your chaos was normal. Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came out. We have a serious opportunity for you, he said finally, voice tight. This is a mistake you'll regret. Think about your future. I'm thinking about it, I said. That's why my answer is no. The quiet that followed wasn't awkward. It was decisive. Full, like a door clicking shut. Richard didn't know what to do with it. People like him only understand push and resistance. They don't know how to fight someone who isn't fighting back, someone who simply stands there and refuses to step into the ring. He turned slightly, looking at Lydia as if she might salvage things. She didn't move. Her arms hung loosely at her sides now. Her shoulders sagged the way a person's do when they've been carrying too much for too long. You should go, I told her gently. Her eyes flicked up to mine. For the first time that morning, I saw something soft in them, something real. I'm sorry, she whispered, and I believed her, not because she deserved forgiveness, but because she sounded like someone who finally heard herself clearly. Richard snapped his fingers at her, an irritated, sharp motion he probably didn't even realize he'd done out loud. Lydia, he hissed. We're leaving. She flinched, not visibly enough for him to notice, but enough for me to see. And suddenly it made sense. She wasn't just exhausted. She was trapped in the same cycle I had been. Same manipulation, same pressure, same slow erosion of confidence. The difference was, I'd escaped. She hadn't. Not yet. You sure you don't want to rethink this? Richard asked, pulling himself back into that brittle, authoritative posture. If you walk away, the offer disappears. Good, I said. He froze. What? Good, I repeated. Because last time you took everything personal and professional and mixed it into one big weapon. I'm not stepping back into that, and I'm sure as hell not letting you act like you're doing me a favor. Lydia looked at the ground. Richard's expression hardened into a sneer. I see. You think you're better than us now. No, I said. I just think I deserve peace. He scoffed, shaking his head. This place, he gestured at my building, this is not a career. This is a placeholder. And even a placeholder, I said, is better than drowning in someone else's ego. Lydia's breath caught quietly. She looked at me with a mix of sadness and envy, maybe. A longing for a moment like this, one she hadn't had the strength to take. You're making a huge mistake, Richard snapped. You're wasting potential. I'm preserving my sanity, I said. His nostrils flared. This conversation is over, he said sharply. Agreed, I replied. I stepped backward, not a retreat, just a closing of distance. Then I walked past them, angled slightly to the side so we didn't brush shoulders. Richard stiffened when I moved around him, as if the idea of me choosing the direction of the moment physically unsettled him. As I reached the door, Lydia spoke my name. I paused, hand on the metal bar. Evan? I turned. Her voice was soft, small, but steady enough to reach me. You were right to leave, she said. You really were. Richard's head whipped toward her, disbelief cutting through his anger. She didn't look at him again. I opened the door without another word and stepped inside. The lobby smelled like old carpet and coffee grounds. A pot plant drooped slightly in the corner. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly overhead. I'd never been so grateful for any of it. As the door clicked shut behind me, their voices outside faded into a dull murmur, then into nothing at all. I walked up the stairs, feeling each step settle something inside my chest. By the time I reached the second floor, I felt lighter. Not euphoric, not triumphant. Just quiet. My kind of quiet. When I walked into the office, my manager, Alan, was already at his desk, flipping through a folder. He looked up with a small, easy smile. Morning, he said. Morning, I replied. You're early, he added. Long commute, I said simply. He nodded, accepting the non-answer without prying. That's one of the reasons I like him. He gives people room to be human without demanding explanations they don't owe him. Oh, before I forget, he said, reaching into his drawer. I wanted to talk to you about something. He pulled out a stapled packet of documents and slid them toward me. What's this? I asked. A new project. A big one, actually. It came in late yesterday. I've been looking over the requirements and, well, I want you to run point on it. I blinked. Me? Yeah, he said. You've been solid, organized, reliable, thoughtful, and you don't panic when things get messy. That's rare around here. He smiled again, this time warmer. I trust you with it. The words hit with a feeling I hadn't known I needed. Trust. From someone who meant it. Someone who didn't weaponize it. I can do that, I said. I know, he replied. I know. Richard never said that to anyone. He used praise like bait, not acknowledgement. Alan said it like a simple, unremarkable truth. I took the packet. Take your time looking through it, he said. We'll go over details this afternoon. I nodded. Thanks, I murmured. He shrugged lightly. You've earned it. I went to my desk, sat down, and let out a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since the parking lot. The hum of a nearby printer, the tap of distant keyboard keys, the low murmur of voices, it all blended into something grounding. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. Outside the window, sunlight moved across the street, catching the shine of the BMW as it finally pulled away. Two figures sat inside, one staring straight ahead with clenched fists, the other pressed against the passenger window, looking small. Neither of them looked back at the building. I didn't watch them go. Instead, I opened the packet Alan gave me, pulled my chair closer, and started reading. The world behind me could burn or rebuild or fall into silence. It wasn't my fire anymore. My life fit in my own hands now. And for the first time in years, it fit perfectly.